Hello and welcome to Films and That. My name is Rob Turnbull.
And my name's Sam Hall.
Today, Sam, what are we looking at?
Vera Chytilová's Daisies. Vera Chytilová's Daisies is a farcical yet whimsical venture of two young women living life to the full with a complete disregard to authority.
This review contains spoilers. This film was part of the Czech New Wave movement. Quite pivotal in developing that style, I think.
What makes them sort of different, even though there's so many similarities to the Western New Wave, is that these films were developed in a kind of opposition to a left-wing government, an extreme left-wing government, because they were on the other side of the Iron Curtain. Communist nations are known to be quite rigorous in censorship and, shutting down freedom of speech and things like that. And there was just a brief moment in the Czech Republic, where they had a voice.
Well, wasn't this film, wasn't it banned at one point for being too decadent or too wanton?
Yeah, a lot of these films that weren't, if they weren't propaganda films, they were considered wrong and therefore banned. There's a lot of scenes in this film of gorging on food, which is completely against the communist agenda, of spreading food out to the masses.
We were saying this is a very punk film. It's all about just...
Yeah, by punk, we mean punk would deliberately hire people that couldn't play because it was meant to completely upturn norms, what was expected, and this is exactly what this film is about. So would you like to say, sort of give a brief overview, even though it's not really a plot?
Well, it just follows the life of two characters, both called Marie. They decide to live their lives just breaking every rule they can think of, basically, and not bowing down to the rules that are enforced upon them. They just want to break them.
The only kind of element of plot is right at the beginning. They say, the whole world is going bad. Do you know what? Let's go bad too, they say with joy. Mm. And then we immediately go from monochrome to colour. There's a lot of references to the forbidden fruit. There's a lot of...
quite obvious references as well.
Symbolism in this film throughout is obvious.
Yeah, it's kind of hitting you over the head rather than kind of subtly handing you.
Yeah.
Their plan is to kind of play tricks on men and kind of get them to pay for their food and stuff like that. So they go on dates with men, don't they?
Yeah.
Get them to pay for their food. They both gorge themselves, and then they go, "Oh, isn't it time for your train?" And then they put the guys on the train,
and then run off the train.
And run off the train
in this kind of satisfying way, and then sort of gleefully giggling at each other.
Yeah. It's
not that they aren't interested in sex. One of the girls cuts open a white sheet and opens it up, and there's a flowery one inside. You immediately go, she's flowered. And there's certainly an implication later on in the film that one of the characters is at least seeing someone. So it's not that they don't want partnership, it's that they don't care about relationship, and they have no interest in any kind of societal norm whatsoever. They basically just want
to have fun, really. There's a scene towards the beginning of the film where they go to see an act perform on stage, and then they just kind of piss around and start stealing people's alcohol and just get pissed. And then everyone starts to kind of turn to look to them. So even the act on stage, it ends up watching these two people as they just piss about.
Yeah, but it's wonderful to watch the expressions on their faces as they're watching horror as they're being upstaged by a couple of girls.
Just pissed girls just pissing about.
Literally blowing bubbles into their drinks. They're breaking authority by doing what they would have done when they were children, having no regard whatsoever for the things you have to think about, like money and consequences. It's poking fun at the hypocrisy of society, because communist regimes inevitably have people who ended up becoming the elites anyway and expect the best food. I mean, for Christ's sake, there's communist dictators all over the world with statues built of them.
Yeah.
Because that's the important thing, isn't it, about giving resources to the people, is building statues to the people who are in charge, and they all live in palaces. I feel like a lot of the performances in this film are method, and that they're given the freedom, they just said, just do what you'd do if you were drunk and you didn't care.
It does feel improvised. I'll give you that. Do you know if there was a script at all?
No.
We don't know.
I think there were obviously terms that were repeated throughout. The most common one they say is, does it matter?
Vadí? Nevadí.
Makes me think of Reeves and Mortimer.
Doesn't matter, does it?
Don't really matter. It doesn't really matter.
I don't suppose you could say that.
It doesn't really matter.
If you said that, you'd be wrong. It don't matter because it don't matter.
Well, it is a bit of a self-indulgent film. I'll say that. It did annoy me in places. It did feel quite pretentious and just, we can do whatever we want. In the same way that French New Wave does that to a certain extent. I think this did it a lot more. And like, oh, we're just going to, cut sausages up in a kind of very obvious phallic message.
And actually an egg at one point.
An egg, yeah.
Another kind of, reference to reproductive organs. And then some of it, you kind of look at it and you kind of go, well, was that about anything at all?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean about it being self-indulgent. I didn't get the impression that it was kind of a whole constructed thing to make you think in a different way.
Yeah.
I felt like each scene was discussed and then acted out rather than having a coherent script. But I mean, that's just my interpretation of it. What do you think?
No, I agree. There's definitely no overarching point at all. In fact, there's a point right at the end of the film. This film is dedicated to those whose sole source of indignation is a trampled on trifle. As if to say, fuck it, who cares?
There's a scene when they're in a stately kind of boardroom and there's this whole big buffet of food that's laid out for them. And they end up just trampling on it and making a mess. And I kind of felt, I didn't really get where the kind of attack on communism lay in that. I think they were meant to be communist, the people at the top that were going in to have that feast. And they just messed it up. But it still kind of showed the bad side of decadence and the bad side of giving everything to the poor.
There's not really any sort of political line it's trying to fall under. Vera was accused of just producing a feminist film, and it is a feminist film, but she kind of rebounded that with saying, no, it's anti-authority. Nobody has to lie in one political arena or the other. You can be just anti-authority because every political group has some sort of authoritative element to it.
That's why the whole punk thing comes in. Just any kind of authority, just rebelling against that. What I quite liked about the film was it did tend to experiment with different filmic techniques. Like every scene seems to have a new kind of look on how the film is constructed. There's some long exposure shots from the back of a train at one point. There's playing around with different tinting of colour and things like that.
There's a scene when one of them snaps some scissors off screen. And then on the next screen, one of the girls is standing and her arm is sort of about a foot away, separate, in a quite crappy camera trick. They proceed then to continue that camera trick, making it obvious. The whole screen becomes like a collage, as you hear this sort of snipping.
So how the characters are acting, the filmmakers are acting in the same way. They're not really bound by any particular way of making the film, are they? They just, well, we want to do this for this scene, so let's do that. And it's quite interesting to see that, but I'm quite glad it wasn't any longer than it was. I thought it would have got a bit annoying after a while.
I can see that. Yeah, I can understand that. I'm still quite happy with it personally.
Cítíš, jak ten život prchá. Nebuď ke mně tak ošklivá, když víš, jak tě miluji.
It's a complete departure from another feminist film we've seen, Cleo.
What, that we did recently?
Yeah, that we did recently. Yeah, Cleo.
It's less about the character of the characters, whereas Cleo was all about her, wasn't it? And how she's going through this struggle, whereas this is more about theme and variation on that theme, I think.
Well, I liked all that, though. I'd like, maybe it's because of my background in interesting things like alternative comedy. I liked that it had that kind of punky, who cares attitude to it. And I like the visuals, I guess.
That was what I found the most interesting, was seeing what they were going to do next with playing around with the techniques. That's what kept me watching it. I didn't like the characters. I find them quite annoying, to be honest. And I'm glad it wasn't any
I
longer.
thought they were easy on the eye.
That's not the point of the film.
No,
is
it's
it?
not, no.
That's exactly the opposite of the point, really.
Těžko dokázat.
Yeah, there isn't any characterization to speak of. There's no plot. I know it's not meant to be, but those things usually keep me invested in a film. So because that wasn't there, I did struggle with bits of it, to be honest. I really felt like the symbolism wasn't for anyone to think about deeply. It was just, this is what we think about it. And it was aimed at people. Do you think it was aimed at general audiences to watch it? Was it aimed at art?
Most definitely. To the point where I watched interviews with the director, and she says she literally did not care about what audiences thought of her films. She just wanted to make films, and she wanted to make them the way she wanted to make them.
Fine, but again, that's punk again, isn't it? Really.
I'm happy with a bit of something that just completely juxtaposes my world every now and then and challenges everything I believe about film.
Ale to nevadí.
That's it for this time of Films and That. Thanks for watching and subscribing. We'll see you next time.
Arrivederci.